An innocent visit to a charity event turns into a shocking confrontation when a fiery volunteer publicly humiliates an elderly man in a wheelchair, all because of the MAGA hat on his head. But what happens next will leave everyone speechless as the man reveals a truth that changes everything. Stay with us as this powerful story unfolds, where prejudice meets grace and one act of misunderstanding sparks a movement for change. Before you speak or act against someone, think twice. The person standing calmly, speaking kindly without anger or abuse, might be far more powerful and influential than they appear. Never underestimate simplicity. Sometimes, the most unassuming people hold the greatest strength. Comments below where you're watching from, and if you like and love our story, kindly subscribe our channel. Life, inspirational, and motivational tales that explore themes of love, unity, and patriotism. Stay with us always for interesting stories. Thanks. Let's start the story. The afternoon sun bathed the bustling downtown park in warm light as families and groups of friends meandered between colorful booths at a community charity event. The air buzzed with cheerful conversations, children's laughter, and the rhythmic beats of a live band performing near the main stage. Volunteers manned their stations, chatting with attendees and encouraging donations for the event's noble cause, providing resources for underprivileged families. Amid the sea of activity, Henry Walker navigated the uneven park pathways in his well-worn wheelchair. In his late 60s, Henry exuded a quiet strength and warmth that often drew people toward him. His neatly pressed shirt and casual blazer hinted at a life of understated dignity, while the bright red MAGA hat perched on his head stood out like a beacon. He smiled softly, nodding at passers-by as he made his way toward a booth marked Community Outreach. Behind the booth stood Jessica Simmons, a spirited woman in her early 30s. Jessica's enthusiasm for helping others was evident in her lively demeanor, but beneath her warm exterior lay an unyielding prejudice shaped by personal experiences. To Jessica, the red MAGA hat symbolized division, hate, and injustice. Ideals she had dedicated her life to fighting against. When her eyes landed on Henry's approaching figure, her cheerful expression hardened. Henry reached the booth and placed a crisp $20 bill in the donation jar. "Thank you for all you're doing here," he said, his voice gentle yet sincere. Jessica forced a polite smile, though her discomfort was evident. "You're welcome," she replied, her tone clipped. Her eyes lingered on the hat, her unease bubbling into irritation. As Henry attempted to strike up a conversation, Jessica couldn't suppress her growing anger. "It's surprising to see someone like you at an event like this," she said, her voice tinged with accusation. Henry raised an eyebrow, confused but undeterred. "Someone like me?" he asked, tilting his head slightly. Jessica folded her arms, glancing pointedly at his hat. "You know what I mean. That hat. It stands for everything this event is trying to overcome. What exactly are you trying to prove by wearing it here?" Henry's smile faltered. "I'm not here to prove anything. I just wanted to support a good cause." Jessica's agitation grew. "Support? Wearing that?" She gestured sharply at his hat. It's a symbol of hate and exclusion. It doesn't belong here." Henry, maintaining his composure, said calmly, "Ma'am, I understand that everyone has their own perspective, but this hat doesn't define the kindness in my heart or my reasons for being here today." Jessica's face flushed with frustration. "You think kindness matters when you're flaunting a symbol that's hurt so many people?" Before Henry could respond, she reached out and snatched the hat off his head. "This doesn't belong at an inclusive event like this." The lively atmosphere around them stilled. Nearby attendees, drawn by Jessica's raised voice, turned to watch the confrontation unfold. Some pulled out their phones, capturing the incident as it happened. Henry froze, his eyes widening in disbelief. For a moment, the two locked eyes, Jessica's burning with conviction, Henry's clouded with hurt and confusion. Slowly, he reached out for his hat. May I have that back, please?" he asked, his voice steady but strained. Jessica hesitated, the crowd's attention beginning to weigh on her. With a scoff, she handed the hat back, muttering, "You shouldn't even be here." Henry carefully placed the hat on his lap, took a deep breath, and met Jessica's gaze one last time. "I came here to help. That's all," he said softly. Then, with his head held high, he wheeled himself away, the eyes of the crowd following him as he disappeared into the throng. Henry carefully placed the hat on his lap, then wheeled himself away, and with a wave of his right hand, gestured to Jessica. The murmurs began almost immediately. Some whispered their support for Jessica, commending her for standing up to what they believed the hat represented. Others shook their heads, appalled by her behavior. "That was uncalled for," one woman muttered to her friend. "He didn't do anything wrong." Jessica straightened her posture, brushing off the incident. She felt justified, convinced that she had taken a stand for what was right. As she turned back to the booth, she didn't notice the glint of a phone camera still pointed at her or the crowd member typing furiously into their social media app. Within minutes, the footage of the exchange began circulating online, sparking a wildfire of reactions. Unbeknownst to Jessica, the incident had planted the seeds of a revelation that would soon upend her assumptions and thrust both her and Henry into the center of a viral storm. The sun began to dip lower in the sky as Henry Walker wheeled himself toward the edge of the bustling park. Though his posture was upright, a subtle tremor in his hands betrayed his shaken composure. He glanced down at the MAGA hat resting on his lap, its bold red color almost mocking in its simplicity. His mind replayed Jessica's words, the sting of humiliation intertwining with a profound disappointment. As he exited the park, Henry reached for his phone and called his longtime friend and confidant, Margaret Brooks, who had been instrumental in establishing the charity event. Margaret answered quickly, her warm tone a stark contrast to Henry's somber voice. "Margaret," he began, "I had an incident at the event, something I need to share with you." Henry recounted the confrontation in measured tones, careful to remain calm despite the whirlwind of emotions bubbling beneath the surface. Margaret listened intently, her disbelief turning into outrage. "Henry, I can't believe someone would treat you like that, especially at an event you've worked so hard to support," she said, her voice firm with indignation. "It's not about me, own weary. It's about what that moment says about us as a society. But I think it's best if I stay quiet for now. Let the dust settle. Meanwhile, back at the charity booth, Jessica Simmons continued her volunteer duties, brushing off the murmurs of disapproval from nearby attendees. A middle-aged man approached her, shaking his head. "You might have gone too far, you know," he said, gesturing toward the direction where Henry had left. He wasn't causing any trouble. Jessica squared her shoulders, her voice sharp. That hat represents everything this event stands against. If standing up for what's right offends people, then so be it. Others in the crowd were less forgiving. "He's just an old man in a wheelchair," muttered a young woman to her friend. "She didn't have to humiliate him like that." Unbeknownst to Jessica, multiple bystanders had recorded the entire exchange. Within an hour, snippets of the incident began circulating on social media platforms, sparking a tidal wave of reactions. Hashtags like MAGA hat incident, respect the elderly, and charity confrontation gained traction as the video was shared thousands of times. Public opinion was split down the middle. On one side, supporters lauded Jessica as a hero for taking a bold stand against a symbol they associated with prejudice and oppression. "Finally, someone's calling out this nonsense," one user tweeted, garnering hundreds of likes. On the other hand, critics flooded the comment sections with outrage, accusing Jessica of being disrespectful, ageist, and ableist. "An elderly, handicapped man being humiliated for his beliefs. How is that justice?" one popular post read. As the debate raged online, the narrative took an unexpected turn. A social media user familiar with the local charity scene recognized Henry in the video and shared a post revealing his identity. "That's not just some random guy in a MAGA hat," the post began. "That's Henry Walker, the founder of the charity hosting this event." The revelation sent shockwaves through the digital sphere. The irony of the situation was too potent to ignore, and the tide of public opinion began to shift. Major news outlets picked up the story, amplifying the discourse and turning the local incident into a national conversation. Jessica remained unaware of the storm brewing online, still convinced she had acted righteously. She scrolled through her social media feed, taking satisfaction in the posts praising her courage. Yet the comments section was becoming increasingly volatile, with users questioning her motivations and condemning her behavior. At the same time, Henry's silence spoke volumes. While reporters and activists clamored for a statement, he declined every interview request. Instead, he convened a private meeting with the charity's board of directors to discuss the event's fallout. "This isn't about me," Henry said firmly during the meeting. "It's about the charity. We've worked too hard to let this incident overshadow what we're trying to achieve." Margaret, who was present, chimed in. "We can't ignore this, Henry. It's affecting our reputation. Sponsors are starting to call, and we need to address it." Henry nodded, his gaze steady. "Then let's address it the right way. I'll meet with her, not to retaliate, but to understand. And maybe, just maybe, we can turn this into something constructive." Meanwhile, the charity board announced an emergency meeting to address the growing controversy. Jessica, still oblivious to Henry's true identity, attended the meeting with confidence, believing her actions were justified and supported by the organization. As the sun set on the park, the echoes of the day's events lingered in the air. Henry, seated in his quiet living room, watched the social media storm unfold with a measured calm. He knew the truth would come out soon enough, and when it did, it would be a moment for reflection, not just for Jessica, but for everyone. The seeds of a revelation had been sown, and the fallout was far from over. As the video of the incident continued to spread like wildfire, it drew the attention of journalists and social media sleuths, eager to uncover more about the individuals involved. Henry Walker's calm demeanor in the face of public humiliation intrigued many, prompting deep dives into his background. What they uncovered sent shockwaves through the online world. Henry wasn't just an ordinary attendee at the charity event. He was its founder and primary donor. Within hours, major news outlets picked up the story, splashing headlines like "MAGA hat wearer humiliated at his own charity event" and "Philanthropist targeted over political views sparks national debate." The revelations painted a stark contrast to the assumptions many had made about Henry based solely on his appearance. Social media, which had initially been divided, quickly began to rally around Henry. Comments flooded in expressing outrage at the way he had been treated. "Imagine humiliating the man who made the entire event possible," one tweet read, garnering tens of thousands of likes. Another wrote, "This isn't about politics anymore. It's about basic respect and decency." Jessica Simmons, meanwhile, remained oblivious to the growing storm. She spent the day basking in the support of those who viewed her as a hero for confronting what they perceived as a symbol of intolerance. But her confidence began to waver when a coworker approached her later in the afternoon, their expression a mixture of concern and urgency. "Jessica," the coworker said, lowering their voice, "I think you should sit down for this." "What is it?" Jessica replied, her tone impatient. The coworker handed her their phone, which displayed a news article detailing Henry's role in the charity. As Jessica read the words, her face paled. "Henry Walker is the founder?" she stammered, her mind racing to piece together the implications. The man she had humiliated publicly, whom she had accused of bringing a symbol of hate into the event, was not only the driving force behind the day's success, but also the financial backbone of the organization she supported. The weight of her actions hit her like a tidal wave. The memory of Henry's hurt expression resurfaced in vivid detail, and for the first time, Jessica felt the sting of regret piercing through her self-righteousness. She realized her actions had not only disrespected Henry, but also jeopardized the integrity of the very charity she had worked so hard to support. Elsewhere, the charity's board convened an emergency meeting to address the fallout. The viral video and subsequent revelations had placed the organization in an uncomfortable spotlight, with sponsors beginning to express concerns about the potential damage to their reputations. "We need to act quickly," one board member insisted. "This isn't just about Jessica's actions, it's about how we respond as an organization." Henry, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke up. "I agree that action is needed, but we must approach this thoughtfully. This isn't about punishing someone. It's about addressing a deeper issue." His calm yet firm demeanor silenced the room. Despite being the aggrieved party, Henry's focus remained on how to turn the incident into an opportunity for growth and understanding. The board decided to summon Jessica for a formal meeting to discuss her behavior and its consequences. A colleague informed her of the request, their tone gentle but firm. "Jessica, the board wants to speak with you tomorrow. You need to be prepared for some tough questions." Jessica nodded silently, the reality of her situation sinking in. She spent the night replaying the incident in her mind, questioning not only her actions, but also the assumptions that had led her to that moment. For the first time, she began to consider the possibility that she had been wrong. Meanwhile, Henry prepared for the press conference he had scheduled for the following day. He had remained silent throughout the ordeal, allowing the public to speculate and draw their conclusions. Now, he was ready to address the nation, not with anger or defensiveness, but with a message of understanding and reflection. As the news of the press conference spread, anticipation reached a fever pitch. People from all walks of life tuned in, eager to hear Henry's perspective. For Jessica, the announcement felt like a countdown to judgment. She braced herself for what was to come, knowing her actions had not only embarrassed herself, but also threatened the values of the charity she had once proudly supported. The stage was set for a confrontation that would not only determine the fates of Henry and Jessica, but also serve as a powerful commentary on the dangers of prejudice and the potential for redemption. The press conference was held in a large hall, packed with reporters, charity members, and supporters. Cameras flashed as Henry Walker, seated in his wheelchair, was helped onto the stage by an aide. Despite the whirlwind of controversy surrounding the event, his demeanor remained calm and composed. His quiet strength was evident as he adjusted the microphone, gazing out at the crowd before beginning. "Thank you all for coming today," Henry began, his voice steady but carrying the weight of sincerity. "I want to address the incident that occurred at our recent charity event, not to assign blame or deepen divides, but to reflect on what it has taught me and, hopefully, all of us." The room fell silent as he continued, choosing his words carefully. "Throughout my life, I have faced assumptions based on appearances, beliefs, or even my physical condition. Each time, it reminded me of the importance of looking beyond the surface. We live in a world where judgments are made in seconds, but understanding takes time and effort." Henry paused, scanning the room as his words settled. "The charity we built wasn't just about raising funds. It was about fostering a community of kindness where differences are celebrated, not used as weapons." What happened at the event was disheartening, but it also serves as a reminder that we all have biases, myself included. The key is recognizing them and choosing to rise above. He went on to share anecdotes about his journey, growing up in challenging circumstances, overcoming physical disabilities, and his commitment to making a difference through his work. "We all make mistakes," he concluded. "What matters is how we move forward, whether we let those moments divide us or bring us closer." Henry's speech was met with a standing ovation. Reporters scrambled to ask questions, but Henry chose not to name Jessica or dwell on the specifics of the incident. His focus was clear. The event was a learning opportunity, not a spectacle for blame. While Henry's words resonated with many, Jessica sat in a nearby room, awaiting her meeting with the charity board. Anxiety churned in her stomach as she rehearsed her explanation, but no amount of preparation could quell her fear of facing Henry. When Jessica entered the meeting room, she was met with the stern faces of board members. Henry sat quietly at the end of the table, observing but not interrupting. Jessica avoided his gaze, her confidence faltering as she took her seat. "Jessica," one board member began, "we've gathered here to address your actions during the event. This charity operates on principles of respect and inclusion, and your behavior has not only harmed our reputation, but also jeopardized the values we stand for. We'd like to hear your perspective." Jessica took a deep breath, struggling to find her voice. "I want to start by apologizing," she said, her tone genuine but laced with nervousness. "What I did was wrong. I made assumptions about Mr. Walker based on a symbol without taking the time to understand him as a person. I was caught up in my own biases, and I deeply regret how I acted." Her apology was met with a few nods, but the tension in the room was palpable. Another board member pressed her. "Do you understand the impact of your actions, not just on Mr. Walker, but on the charity and the people we serve?" "I do," Jessica replied, her voice wavering. "I let my emotions cloud my judgment, and in doing so, I disrespected the very mission of this organization. I can't undo what I did, but I'm willing to learn and grow from this." The room fell silent as the board deliberated, but it was Henry who finally broke the quiet. "I believe Jessica's apology is sincere," he said, his tone firm but kind. "Mistakes happened, and while her actions hurt me, I see potential for change. However, accountability is important." Henry turned to Jessica, his gaze steady. "Jessica, I'm willing to forgive you. Not for my sake, but because I believe you're capable of learning from this. But forgiveness doesn't mean there are no consequences. It means you're being given an opportunity to grow." Jessica's eyes filled with tears as Henry continued. "I'd like you to take time to educate yourself, to understand why your actions were hurtful, and how you can prevent something like this from happening again. The charity will support you in this process, but it's up to you to put in the work." The board unanimously decided on Jessica's temporary suspension from her volunteer duties, coupled with a requirement to undergo training on diversity, inclusion, and communication. The charity also announced new policies to ensure such incidents wouldn't happen again, including mandatory training for all staff and volunteers. Jessica left the meeting with a mix of relief and determination. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but Henry's forgiveness and the board's decision gave her a chance to rebuild. That evening, she sat at her desk, drafting a public apology. The words didn't come easily, but she was determined to take responsibility. "Dear Mr. Walker and the community," she wrote, "I want to express my deepest apologies for my actions at the charity event. I acted out of ignorance and bias, and in doing so, I failed to uphold the values of respect and inclusion that this charity represents. I'm committed to learning from this experience and making amends. I hope to earn your forgiveness through my actions moving forward." Jessica hit save, unsure if her words would be enough, but knowing she had taken the first step. Meanwhile, Henry reflected on the day's events, hopeful that this incident would not only transform Jessica, but also inspire others to confront their own biases. Jessica sat across from Henry in a quiet room at the charity's office, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped them in her lap. Henry's calm demeanor put her at ease, but the weight of her actions still bore down on her. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "Mr. Walker," she began, her voice steady but laced with emotion, "I want to apologize, not just for my actions at the event, but for the assumptions I made about you. I let my biases cloud my judgment, and in doing so, I disrespected you and everything this charity stands for. I am deeply sorry." Henry studied her for a moment, his expression soft but unreadable. "Jessica," he said, finally, "it takes courage to admit when you're wrong, and I appreciate your honesty. But more than words, what matters is what you do next." Jessica nodded, swallowing hard. "I know I can't undo what I did, but I want to make amends. I'm committed to understanding my biases and learning how to approach situations like this with empathy and kindness. I'd be grateful for the chance to show that I can do better." Henry leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "Jessica, I believe in second chances. Mistakes are a part of being human, but they're also an opportunity for growth. I'm willing to give you that chance, on one condition." "Anything," Jessica said earnestly. "You'll continue working with the charity," Henry said, "but under probation. During this time, you'll participate in training on diversity and inclusion. And I want you to be actively involved in our new campaign for promoting empathy and unity. This isn't just about you, it's about setting an example for others." Jessica's eyes brimmed with tears as she nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Walker. I won't let you down." The conversation marked the beginning of a transformation, not just for Jessica, but for the charity as a whole. Henry saw the incident as a wake-up call, a reminder of the need to address biases and foster understanding within the organization. He worked with the board to implement new initiatives, starting with mandatory training for all volunteers and staff. The charity also launched a public campaign called Bridging Divides, aimed at promoting inclusivity and understanding in communities. Henry and Jessica appeared together in a video for the campaign, sharing their story and the lessons they had learned. The video quickly went viral, resonating with viewers who saw it as a powerful example of forgiveness and change. In the video, Henry spoke with his characteristic warmth and humility. "We all carry biases, whether we realize it or not," he said. "What matters is how we choose to confront them. It's not about perfection, it's about progress." Jessica followed, her voice steady but heartfelt. "I made a mistake, a big one, but I'm grateful for the chance to learn and grow. This experience has taught me the importance of listening, understanding, and treating everyone with respect. The campaign sparked a wave of support, with people sharing their own stories of confronting biases and advocating for change. Donations to the charity increased significantly, enabling them to expand their programs and reach more communities. As part of her journey, Jessica threw herself into her work with renewed dedication. She attended every training session, engaged with experts on diversity and inclusion, and sought out conversations with people whose experiences differed from her own. Over time, her perspective broadened, and she became a vocal advocate for empathy and unity. At the next charity event, Jessica approached her role with a newfound sense of purpose. She greeted every guest warmly, ensuring that everyone felt welcome and valued. Henry watched from a distance, his heart swelling with pride at the transformation he had witnessed. In a poignant moment, a young girl approached Jessica with her mother, holding a small donation. The mother smiled and said, "We saw your video. Thank you for sharing your story. It inspired us to get involved." Jessica knelt to the girl's level, her smile genuine. "Thank you for being here. Every little bit helps, and we're so glad to have you as part of our community." As the event wound down, Henry and Jessica stood side by side, watching the crowd disperse. The atmosphere was one of unity and hope, a stark contrast to the tension of the previous incident. "Thank you for giving me this chance," Jessica said softly, turning to Henry. "Yeah, you earned it," Henry replied, his tone kind but firm. "And remember, this is just the beginning. Change doesn't happen overnight. It's a journey." Jessica nodded, her resolve strong. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, but she was ready to face it. Together, she and Henry had turned a moment of conflict into a catalyst for growth, proving that even the deepest divides could be bridged with understanding and compassion. As they parted ways that evening, Jessica felt a sense of purpose she had never known before. She had not only been forgiven, but empowered to make a difference, and she was determined to make every moment count. The sun cast a golden glow over the park as Henry strolled through the familiar pathways, his wheelchair gliding effortlessly across the paved trail. The air buzzed with laughter and chatter, much like the day of the charity event that had forever altered the course of his organization and his perspective. This time, however, the atmosphere carried a profound sense of unity. Attendees waved and smiled warmly at Henry as they passed, many stopping to thank him for his contributions or share how his story had inspired them to reflect on their own biases. Henry paused by a fountain, watching children toss coins into the water, their giggles echoing in the crisp afternoon air. He thought back to the day of the incident, the sting of humiliation still vivid in his memory. Yet, the pain had given way to something much greater, a determination to transform that moment into a force for good. The charity he had founded now had a new mission: to promote empathy, diversity, and inclusion in every corner of the community. The response had been overwhelming. Donations poured in, volunteers flocked to help, and the organization's message spread far beyond the confines of their city. What began as a personal ordeal had blossomed into a movement of understanding and reconciliation. As Henry continued his walk, he noticed Jessica near the stage at the heart of the park. She was busy coordinating the final touches for a new charity event focused on celebrating diversity. Her energy and enthusiasm were infectious, her leadership skills shining as she guided volunteers and greeted guests with genuine warmth. Henry couldn't help but smile. Jessica spotted him and waved, walking over with a bounce in her step. "Mr. Walker," she said with a grin, "it's so good to see you here." "Please, Jessica," Henry replied with a chuckle. "How many times do I have to tell you to call me Henry?" "Eh," Jessica laughed, a lightness in her tone that reflected her growth over the past few months. "Old habits die hard, I suppose." They stood together for a moment, taking in the vibrant scene before them. Booths representing different cultures lined the paths, showcasing art, music, and food from around the world. Children played games while parents mingled, and volunteers handed out flyers, encouraging inclusivity and kindness. "None of this would have been possible without you," Jessica said, her voice filled with gratitude. "You turned what could have been just another viral scandal into something that actually matters. I'll never forget that." Henry looked at her, his expression soft. "You deserve credit too, Jessica. You faced your mistakes, owned up to them, and committed to change. That's not easy to do, but because you did, you've inspired others to do the same." Jessica's eyes shimmered with emotion. "Thank you, Henry. I'll never take this second chance for granted." As the event kicked off, Henry and Jessica stood side by side on the stage, addressing the crowd together. Henry spoke about the importance of compassion, reminding everyone that true strength lies in choosing to understand rather than judge. Jessica followed with her own testimony, candidly sharing her journey of reflection and growth, and encouraging others to confront their biases with humility and an open heart. The crowd erupted in applause, their cheers a testament to the power of reconciliation and the collective desire for a better, kinder world. Later, as the event wound down, Henry sat quietly under a tree, watching the park come alive with the colors of unity. Jessica joined him, handing him a cup of lemonade. "This feels different, doesn't it?" she said, gazing at the smiling faces around them. "It does," Henry replied, his voice steady. "It feels hopeful." A final announcement echoed over the speakers, thanking attendees for their support and inviting them to continue spreading the message of inclusivity. The sound of clapping filled the air as people began to disperse, their spirits lifted by the day's events. As Henry wheeled away from the park, he carried a profound sense of peace. The incident that had once brought him pain had become a catalyst for something far greater, a reminder that even in a divided world, change was always possible. In a world divided by assumptions, Henry thought, his heart swelling with pride. It takes courage to listen, reflect, and choose understanding over judgment. True change begins when we look beyond appearances. Before you speak or act against someone, think twice. The person standing calmly, speaking kindly without anger or abuse, might be far more powerful and influential than they appear. Never underestimate simplicity. Sometimes, the most unassuming people hold the greatest strength. Comments below where you're watching from, and if you like and love our story, kindly subscribe our channel. Life, inspirational, and motivational tales that explore themes of love, unity, and patriotism. Stay with us always for interesting stories.